Okay, so a primary key is in Cargo, the actual primary key is going to be the underscore ID column in every table, but that obviously has literally no semantic meaning whatsoever associated to it. And also, every time you change every time you recreate the table, the ID changes. And I don't know if it changes without your own. Does it change other than when you recreate the table?
No.
Okay. So the only issue
Well,
is when.
unless you delete the page and create the page again, is that kind of thing. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So.
Megan, could you zoom a little bit?
Oh.
If not, it's readable. It's just it could be.
Yeah. There you go.
That's even better.
Okay. Wait. Does that? Oh, that's like the slide toggle. Okay. Yeah. So there's like something can go wrong, and so it changes if you delete a page, or things are just normally happening correctly, and then you recreate the table or whatever, and then suddenly the primary key is completely different. And so on the wiki, you actually kind of don't really care about this. And the ID field is implicitly used it is used every time you have a list type field when you use holds, or if you explicitly join the list type field without using the holds keyword, which you should always do. You should never use holds.
Whoa.
Yeah, sorry. You can use holds if you don't know what you're doing yet, which is very valuable. But once you know what you're doing, you should not use holds anymore. Holds is actually great. I actually was going to do an entire slide talking about how great list type fields are, but then I didn't have time, so I didn't do that. Yeah, list type fields are like, I think, actually the best case of a best practice that sometimes you shouldn't do, because in an actual best practice, I would say you should never do a list type field. But they're so convenient to do because it's pretty hard to do one-to-many queries and stores if you're not doing a list type field. The list type field gives you very easy access to that, and you get like 80% of the benefits. Anyway, so the ID field is not static, and it has zero semantic meaning, which means that from a technical point of view, it is the primary key of the row. Oh, Yaron, can you mute?
I want to watch one of these episodes.
Sorry.
Okay. So yeah, so tech from like an SQL point of view, that's the unique identifier of the row until you delete a key or delete a page or recreate the table or whatever. But for our purposes, when you're trying to like do best practice stuff, sorry, Aaron, can you mute again? I can hear you typing.
Oh, sorry.
Okay, thank you. So, and I forgot what I was saying. Yeah, so we want to have like a primary key with actual meaning, because so when you have so the word relation in relational database, which Cargo is, because it's built on SQL, which is a relational database management system. There's a bunch of mathematical stuff that holds whenever you have relational data like this. So relation means that it's a map between sets of information that are true or not true, and every row in the table means this set of things is a true statement. So if you have like a list, if your table is like types of animals and what you call a baby animal, then it's true that a baby cat is called a kitten. And so you're not really saying, so I guess the way you would normally think of this is that you're saying the name for a baby cat is a kitten, because kitten is in the column for baby animal of cat. But actually more what you're saying is cat and kitten correspond to each other when you want the first one to be the adult animal and the second one to be the baby animal. And so when you do stuff like joining tables together, you're extending these relations I did a really terrible example because I can't think of anything that I would join to that table. I'll make up a different example to use in a bit. But the idea is that you want to extend these true statements that you have to be true about information in other tables. So the entity in one table needs to be referred to the same entity that another table refers to so that you can join on that entity. And the identifier of one row in one table that allows you to join that row to other tables is what's meant by the primary key. And this should have semantic meaning because you want to be able to normalize your database. So normalizing means making your database conform to what's called the normal forms. There's like 6 of them, and then there's a couple others that are like kind of different. There's a bunch of them, but most people only care about the first 3. And the idea behind them is that you want to make sure that you're never storing redundant data, and you want to make sure that data is well set up so that you're able to join stuff together and you're able to do queries with where statements that make sense. And if you don't conform to them, you'll end up with a bunch of duplication in your data, which could be okay because when you're storing data programmatically, it's possible that external stuff is guaranteeing that the single source of truth still holds, but now the database itself has 2 separate locations where something is stored, and theoretically a bad actor could change one of them, but the other one is the same, or you could mess up one of your scripts and so they stop updating at the same time or whatever. So it's really important that there's actually a single source of truth for all of the properties of your primary key in the entire schema of tables. So the normal forms help you to ensure that if you follow all of them. So the first one is that each value is a value. And like I was saying, list type fields, you would say if you have like list of phone numbers in one field, that would be a violation of the first normal form because it's not, you can't say like join this list of phone numbers to the city corresponding to this phone number's area code or something. And in fact, if you wanted to do a correspondence from a phone number to an area code, then actually the phone number itself isn't an entity. It's part of a phone number that's going to be an entity. And so you would have to actually, you would want to have a separate table that associates phone numbers and area codes. I'm actually thinking now how you would even do that, and that seems really annoying. You'd probably want to do area code as one field and another field with the rest of the phone number, and then if you wanted to display the phone number including area code, you actually have to concatenate them. And if you wanted to do that, it actually would be important that you set it up that way instead of having the 2 separate fields, because what happens if you mess up your code and the 2 separate fields aren't the same anymore? And you want the database itself to enforce single source of truth, not the code that creates the database. So list type fields seem to violate the first normal form, and they don't. And the reason that they don't is that a list type field isn't real. That's not actually a field. So they're technically, I actually don't know how Cargo physically stores it, but I'm pretty sure that it stores one field that has that name with _ full after that. So if you wanted to get the...
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, okay.
It's stored in 2 different ways. There's the full thing which holds the actual value, and then there's an additional table, helper table that stores all the lists, each one in their own row.
Okay, right. Yeah. So if you pretend that the full field doesn't exist, then this data is normalized, and that's fine. But since the full field actually does exist, it is not normalized. But it's kind of okay because it's just such a giant pain in the ass to deal with one-to-many relations in Wikitext. And in Lua, it's fine because you're using an actual language that doesn't make you do things like comment out white space and shit. But in regular MediaWiki, cargo would be pretty impossible to do anything reasonable with without list type fields. So this is a case of it's okay to violate this in some queries. But if you're ever, and when you use the holds function in one of your queries, it's doing the join for you. But you can also just explicitly join the two tables together if you want to. And usually I recommend doing that because holds kind of struggles when you have really complicated queries with a bunch of tables. And it's not uncommon for me to be joining like 5 or 6 tables together in a query. And usually one of them will be a list type field or a list table. And a really good reason to use a list table is that it's the only way to get a multi-line write happen when you're writing Lua code or any code. Each of the rows stores one at a time unless you use a list type field. And that's actually one of the things I would like to work on in the extension one day. But I don't know if I know enough of the database stuff to do that. We'll see. So yeah, so you have this like kind of violation of normal form, but it's kind of okay. So the second one, and so normal forms 2 and 3 are violated constantly, and I think that's also okay. Specifically in a wiki context, it's okay. And the reason that, wait, I'm gonna move forward. I have like an entire slide about that part. This is a slide I skipped during the talk because I just had no time. Yeah, okay. Yeah, so why are normal forms 2 and 3 violate? Well, so, okay, so I shouldn't have skipped forward yet. Sorry. Okay, so the second normal form says that every value that you have depends on the entire primary key. So if I have a table of tenures, that's the tenure of a player on the team, then a player can join a team, leave, then rejoin, re-leave, and that could happen like 10 times. So saying just player plus team isn't sufficient. So you need player plus team plus start date. So you have this primary key of the row, which is the semantic unique or semantically relevant unique identifier of this row in the tenures table. The region of the team should not be in this table. You could put the region of the table there. It would be reasonable to say whenever I query a tenure, or it would be reasonable to say I want to show all of the times that this player has played on a Korean team. And it would be really convenient if the region of the team were in this table because then you don't have to join anything. But that field isn't allowed to be there because it only depends on team. It doesn't depend on start date and it doesn't depend on player. And having this normal form and conforming to it guarantees that you don't have any data duplication where you could have the region be in the teams table and you could also have the region being in the tenures table. And then you have another case where you have two things in the database and you have code outside of the database guaranteeing that they're the same, but actually you want the database itself to guarantee that it's the same by only having it stored in one location. So because every item of a primary key is itself an entity, saying that you can't only depend on part of it means that information that could be in that entities table won't also be here. So this is another way of guaranteeing single source of truth. And then the third normal form says that, so for example, if you have a table of MVPs in games, so each game, after the game is over, they name an MVP who's the most valuable player on the winning team. You might say, okay, well, the year that the player was born, well, that does depend on the entire primary key because you can't go from the primary key is just the ID of the game. So every game has some ID in somewhere. And you can't actually divide up that one single field into smaller parts. So the player's country of birth does actually depend on the entirety of the primary key. But the thing is that it actually depends on this intermediate value. It's not that the country of birth is determined by the game ID. It's that the game ID is determined, or the game ID determines the player, and then the player determines the country of birth. And so again, you have this idea of, well, if you allowed a violation of this, then you're allowing a case of duplication to happen, because this value could be in the player's table, but it could also be in the MVP's table, and we don't want that. So it has to just be in the player's table. But unfortunately, 2 and 3, even though the examples I just gave seem that this is pretty easy to follow, actually on wikis it's violated constantly, and it's kind of okay that it's violated constantly. So, I thought I had a slide just about second and third normal form violations, so maybe I don't. Okay, well, so an example, say that you're making a wiki about the Oscars, and you want to have a table that's going to show some relationship between the GDP of countries that win Best Foreign Film. So you want to take the table for Oscar winners, and you have each year, you have each reward type, and then you have a winner. So it's pretty obvious that if you say, what's the GDP of the country of the winner of this year's award in this category, if you put that in the same table as the information about the winners, that's a really obvious third normal form violation, because GDP depends on country, which depends on winner, and that should actually be in a table of country data. But the thing is, this wiki is entirely about the Oscars, so I don't want to make a slide, or I don't want to make a page for Australia. I don't want to make a page for Korea. And that would be kind of insane to have these pages be on your wiki. And this is a place where...
Talking to me? Talking to me or Nina?
Oh, you're unmuted again.
Oh, I'm sorry. Everyone on YouTube can hear this.
So, and this is a place where wiki data is probably really relevant to the conversation, because this is something where, oh, well, if you can use wiki data, you actually can maintain this normality, because you can just query from there. But we're going to pretend wiki data doesn't exist for the purposes of illustration. So yeah, so it would be pretty insane to have this wiki that's just about the Oscars and have a countries table on it. So I think it's totally fine if you want to put that piece of information into this table. It starts to be a problem if you want to put this piece of information into 7 different tables, because then again you get to the single source of truth issues. But then I would argue in contrast that if you're using this piece of information in 7 different tables, probably the entity is actually relevant enough to your topic at hand that you should actually make a page for Australia where you show every movie that's ever won from Australia, and you have every query that you could make about Australia be shown on that page. And it would be pretty reasonable to say at that point, okay, actually there's data missing from the wiki. But in a lot of cases, it makes sense not to make a page for stuff that you would need to in order to keep normality. And basically the issue is that you have something which your database thinks should be an entity, but the wiki doesn't think should be an entity. And when you have that disagreement, then that's when you start getting into issues. And red links have a lot of issues whenever you have any kind of data. And so that's kind of where the idea of the 0th normal form comes in, which so while I think it's okay to violate second and third normal form, and kind of okay to violate first normal form in this specific example of using list type fields, though again, if you're doing all of your stuff in Lua at that point, you should never violate that. But if you're just doing queries in wiki text and you're like starting to incorporate cargo, that's fine. Don't worry about it. But the 0th normal form, this you absolutely have to follow. And unlike 1, 2, and 3 normal forms, which have precise mathematical definitions for them, which I don't remember and didn't read and don't care about, this one is kind of incapable of having a precise mathematical definition. And the idea is that every primary key should yield a well-defined physical data location. And the concept of a physical data location doesn't exist in conventional databases because you insert rows and then they're just in the database. Well, where did you insert them from? What? Why do you care? But in Wiki, where is the row stored from is vitally essential, because that's where anyone can edit the data from. That's where the data is going to be updated from. Every time you save that page, Cargo is going to check, did anything change, and it'll update the database from there. And the entire point of a wiki is that stuff is editable, and the data is permanently attached to this page, and it's stored from this page. And if you store something from more than one page, then you're going to have duplicate data. So it's really, really, really important that you have some global convention about how, or I guess it's not a global convention, but globally you have a convention per table about how data is going to be stored from that. And what's good enough for saying precisely where data is stored? That's where I have this example of, oh right, it's not actually my slides because, okay, so this example that I was talking about yesterday, how precise is it? If I say that the primary key is the 7th roster change of Tuesday, January 7th, is that on the page for the week of Sunday, January 5th, or is that on the page for the day Tuesday, January 7th? And the answer is, I don't really care if you're able to determine that or not. And the reason is that I made navigation to get around this issue. So if you go to if you go to a page in a week that isn't divided, so if I went to like the March 23rd page, that would redirect me to the March 22nd page. So every single date the page exists, and it just redirects you to the Sunday week page, unless it's an individual day page. So I don't consider this a zero normal form violation because the navigation stops it from being one. And if you're allowed to make navigation to get around a mathematical principle, it's not a mathematical principle. So this is really not a precise thing, but it is still very important. So there's a lot of ways that you could accidentally violate this. The first way is that if you have, well, I guess I said this is not in the best order, but okay. So the first way is lack of communication. If one person is writing code that is like, I'm gonna show all of the items, all of the recipes that an item can build into, and someone else says, I'm gonna show all of the recipes that go into building an item. These are opposite relations, and one person develops one code, the other person develops the other code, and both of them are writing to the same table, and but they're stored on opposite pages. And you have duplicate rows in your table, and then someone's like, oh shit, we have all these duplicate rows. And so then they go through and they try and delete everything, and so they delete half of the stuff, but it's like they deleted half of each person's code, and suddenly you just have a giant disaster and absolutely no way to fix it except to start over. So lack of communication and writing duplicate code can absolutely lead to 0th normal form violations. Similarly, if you hard code a cargo store onto a page instead of only doing it through templates, someone might later then add the cargo store to the template, not realizing that there was a store on the page. Or someone might copy paste a store incorrectly, and you can end up just having things sent from random pages. So if you if you write a cargo store directly onto the player page saying about the team, and you write a cargo store directly into the team page saying about what the player is doing, there's not an easy way to check the source code to figure out what's going on, where is stuff stored from. If you try to make users have a lot of flexibility, I would say this is probably one of the most frequent issues that I encounter on Gamepedia wikis from admins who are overeager to make users have flexibility in what they're doing. And the idea is, if this user doesn't, if this user has 5 different ways to do this thing, then they don't have to know how to do it because any of these 5 ways would work. And I do not agree with the sentiment, because then the actual situation is that the user needs to know all 5 of these ways, because what's to not know that the 6th way doesn't work? And what if they encounter the first 4 ways on different pages and it just leads to huge confusion? But then it can also lead to zeroth normal form violations, because one way that you can add flexibility is to allow a template to be saved from more than one different location. Especially if you're writing into cargo. So if you don't want a user to have to know that your data page exists, you allow them to write stuff from the overview page, but you can also write stuff from the data page, and then stuff gets duplicated, stuff gets deleted inconsistently, and you have exactly the same situation of not knowing where data is coming from. But I think the biggest way is red links. And red links are probably the single biggest challenge with making a robust wiki or making a robust database on a wiki, because of notability guidelines. Because what does a database think of notability guidelines? Like, everything goes into the database. But if you're not allowed to create an entity page because it doesn't meet notability guidelines, well, what if you have to join information about that entity to another table? What if you want to display some information about that entity somewhere else? Imagine if on Wikipedia, you can have a page, so you have like artist pages that show their discography, and then it can also show the entire song list of every single album that they wrote or that they performed. And some really notable songs have their own pages. So you have a page about a song. So a song is clearly an entity, and you can store information about the song. For example, you might want to show the runtime, how it placed on a chart, stuff like that. So that you want to show that stuff on the discography page, and then you want to show discography on the artist page. So imagine a case where every entity has to have a page, which means that every single song that has ever been written and performed by any artist needs to have its own Wikipedia page. That's insane. You absolutely cannot do that. So notability guidelines are crucial to have, but then it also means that you are certainly going to have second and third normal form violations, but it can also very easily lead to zeroth normal form violations if you're not really careful. And the answer is that, well, on Wikipedia, you actually cannot have songs be a primary key and guarantee that there's information in a database table of songs for every single song, because not every song has its own page. Or if you do this, then the convention has to be, okay, well, the song information is always stored from the disc page. And what happens when a song is included on more than one disc? Okay, well, that clearly doesn't work. And the answer is, well, you're just kind of really screwed. I don't know what the answer is to that. Like, violating this thing sucks. And I guess the real answer is you probably shouldn't be doing a database on Wikipedia. So on my wiki, I try really hard to, and I always push for having less notability guidelines, because I want to be able to have a robust database, but then people don't want to have to maintain all of this stuff. And so you have to have either a bunch of automatically generated, automatically populated pages where you can store information from, or you have to not have data stored somewhere. Or, so the slightly shitty compromise solution, which I think is probably the most common, is that you have to have the ability to display manually enter data about entities that don't have their own pages in places where you would normally want to query that. So for example, you do actually have this idea of a table for every single song, except of course not every single song has a page. If possible, you're going to query that information and display it on disk pages. And if not, you're going to manually enter it. And even though you lose the single source of truth in a database, at least you don't have the zero normal form violation. And you could argue, well, it's actually, that's worse. Like having to enter this information manually, that's worse than this ridiculous zero normal form idea. But I think that actually is the correct solution, that if an entity doesn't deserve a page, then you just have to enter its stuff manually and pretend that database isn't available for that entity. Or again, you could just lower notability guidelines, create a lot more subpages, and guarantee a page for every entity. I think in enterprise situations, it's often going to be a lot more possible to avoid red links, because I guess you're not talking about millions and millions of entities, so the scaling issue isn't as big of an issue, and you don't have to please random people on the internet, but maybe you have to please random people at work who don't like the idea of a bunch of stub pages and a bunch of automatically generated low content pages. And there's also an SEO concern about having a ton of stub pages on a wiki, where Google will rank you worse if you have a lot of really shitty low quality pages, which these are. They're low quality stub pages, but I think it's important to have. So an example of how I almost, so the last violation source that I didn't discuss before is incomplete data migrations, and that's where I'm stuck right now. Is that I have I've been moving. So the 10 years example is a real example that I'm doing right now, and that was all of the slides that I showed before about the examples of cargo and Lua in my wiki are this table that I want to say I started working on in August, and I'm still not done. So this has been a very large project. I spent pretty much all of November and December working exclusively on this. So that's 2 months of complete work and 8 or 9 months of semi-focused on this work, plus 1.5 years of vaguely planning to do this before that. So this is by far the biggest project that I've ever worked on in any context. But this particular part of it involves moving tenure data from team pages to player pages. And so there's one table, which is called list player current, which is a terrible table name. But it's named after the template that's stored to it, which is terrible. Don't do that. Name the template after the table, or let the names be completely unrelated. Do not name your table after a template if it doesn't actually make sense. So I have this old table that stores from team pages. And then I have this new table that I'm calling tenures, because that actually means the thing that it represents. And that's stored from player pages. But not all of the data is transferred to the new system yet, because the new system requires about 7 years of manual data migration, which has been an absolute joy. And everyone is very excited about needing to work on this. And it's probably going to take about 2 years to finish the full migration. But right now, I have these 2 different tables, and one of them is writing the same data from player pages, and the other one is writing the same data from team pages. And this is leading me to have to do things like have a flag field in the teams table that says, is the data converted yet? And if yes, then query tenures. If no, then query list player current. And that's just like a total disaster and really awkward and inconvenient. And I've been meaning to change it to a case where I join both of these tables to the team tables, and I say where either one of them is null or the other one is null, and check that depending on what the status of the flag is. And okay, so if I join both of these rows to teams, and I require that only one of them be defined per row in the combined table, then I can check for one being null or the other being null, and I won't get overlaps by querying both tables at the same time. It's just gonna suck basically. But I think I can set it up to do it in one query without first checking the status of this flag. And anyway, so I was thinking to myself, well, what if I just make the old data store to the new data? Because I have all of the information there, I could just make the old stuff store to 10 years. But that is not okay, because that's a zero normal form violation. And so all of this inconvenience that I have with the two separate tables, that's a much less bad situation. And I will definitely have this ridiculously convoluted setup until the process is done. And make everyone who uses my API extremely happy with having to deal with this difficulty. So I do actually really think that this is a very, very important concept. And I think a lot of wikis probably accidentally violate it. And you should definitely try to not violate it. Okay, so that was most of what I wanted to talk about. And I guess that was 45 minutes to do 3 slides of my 12 slide long presentation from yesterday that lasted 30 minutes.
Nice. Very cool. Do we have any questions?
Gosh, I mean, there's, you know, a lot of this is just, well, it's just good data design. And as I guess you alluded to, a lot of the need for these kinds of rules is because you don't, it would be more obvious if you were just starting from, if you knew all the data you wanted to store right at the beginning, but here you're like dealing with new needs and so forth. And I guess you started out with a bad schema or something, but.
Well, I started out with SMW, so.
Oh, okay. Well, no. Well, okay, but still, but even with SMW, it's still the templates define the data structure.
Yeah, and I think the idea of a zero normal form is applicable to SMW also, but
yeah, I mean, right. I mean,
Argo
the
is
structure
better.
is going to be the same, either way, in terms of like what actually goes on which page and all that.
Yeah.
Yeah, but you know, the fact that it keeps changing means that you can end up with like the same, not being sure which data should go where and all that. Yeah.
Yeah, and also I guess another issue is that if you always put a group by in all of your queries, which you could just do because whatever reason you expect there to be multiple lines, and you never do like a count or a sum, you might never notice, and you also don't know what the page values tab looks like, which is probably like 80% of users. You could very easily end up with duplicated data and not even know it. And if you like do then add a count or a sum, you might not realize that your numbers are all completely wrong because you have all of this duplication in your table.
Yeah, well, that's just, yeah, I hope that cargo bug has gone away or will go away, where sometimes there's duplicated rows.
Oh, yeah, that's like the validation of fields. I actually had someone with that issue yesterday where he was like, why are there duplicate fields? And I forgot that it can happen when you put floats into an integer column. And so it took me like 10 minutes to debug instead of 30 seconds. And that was a long time.
Okay. Yeah, that probably should. All right. Well, maybe that's something to work on in the Create Camp tomorrow. Fixing.
Yeah. Well, I more meant that like you could end up with actual duplicated data because you're storing it from more than one place and you don't realize it.
Oh, I see. Okay. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, that's the real. That's the actual problem. Yeah. The real thing I wanted to talk about, that I want to ask about is your statement that you should never use the page name, which of course.
Yeah, never, ever
99.
use page name.
I was gonna say 99, but maybe 95% of people use the page name as.
Oh, I'm sure. Yeah. So I use page name. I still have. Okay. So while I was writing these slides, I got so angered by the fact that I have to like make this qualification that I do actually have a couple tables where I still use page name. And I got so angry at this that I finally changed it to overview page. So my convention is that I call something overview page if it's not, if it's just an alias for page name.
What?
But basically, like, because it's very conceivable that you would want to move a store. So right now, everything is stored from the overview page, but then you want to store stuff from a data page because you want to hide stuff from users who accidentally vandalize. They're trying to fix stuff and they accidentally vandalize, and you want to hide stuff from well-intentioned users, or you just decide that you want to have an ability. You're storing a lot of rows from this one page, and so you don't want it to be user-facing because it takes too long to save. That's come up a bunch of times. Aaron, are you okay?
Yes, something fell. I'm all right.
Okay.
Unstable data structure.
So yeah, so you could very easily keep the exact same database schema, but the location that you're storing from changes because you're moving stuff to a subpage, you're moving stuff to a data page, you were storing from player page and now you want to store from team page instead. It's the same data. Your schema should not change as a result of changing where you're storing from. And if you call your field overview page, you can change how you're aliasing, or you can change what you're aliasing by overview page. So it can start out as just the page name or full page name magic word, and then later on it can change to, well, just the page name without the namespace prefix because now it's in the data namespace. So yeah, I think it's extremely important to decouple these things, and using page name is not good, especially if third-party code is using your cargo stuff via the API.
Okay, but I mean, in most wikis, you have a page about every, I don't even know, about people, a person or something. In most wikis, it's not going to, that idea won't change. There'll always be
Right.
one page per entity or the other way around.
But why do you know for a fact that for the next 10 years, you're storing cargo from that page? What if you're storing cargo from a data page? What if you're storing cargo from a sub page? So it's not, what if the page moves? What if you have to make a disambiguation URL? So it's not actually a guarantee that the page name is always going to stay the same. And if you are defining your primary key to include the page name or to be the page name, you need to alias it. You should never ever use the field. So you can use the field name, or you can use page name when you're actually providing someone with a link of where to edit, because of course they want that to change if the page moves. And it's also like, if your wiki does this, I wouldn't tomorrow go through and redo everything. But the instant anyone is querying your API from external to your wiki, they cannot use page name because you won't have any discovery of where you're using page name, because on the wiki itself you can just search underscore page name, and if you have Elasticsearch and you can do an in-source search with a regular expression, you can just get that. But once there's external code, that's really scary if people are using page name in external code. So don't give them the opportunity to do that.
So then I assume for auto-completion and forms, you do mapping?
I rarely use
Okay.
I have a problem with auto-completion in forms, which is that it only shows the first 100 things. So the way that I do auto-completion in forms is I make a Lua module that does the query for me, and then I save that on a page, and then I give it a list of values that is the that page where I did my query in Lua. That is how I do that.
What's wrong with just showing 100 values? Wait, I don't understand.
I have more than 100 values that need to be populated. So if only 100 values are allowed and there's 150 champions in League of Legends, then
Oh, you're talking about the tokens input type? You can only enter 100?
the drop down.
Possible auto completions for one value, or when you're filling out a list of values, you can only have 100 in that list.
Okay, so I'm specifically talking about drop downs, I guess. But it's a drop down combo box or something.
Combo box?
Yeah, I don't know. I actually don't use that many page forms. Most of what I use page forms for is having so
Okay, but I mean, well, this might explain it. I mean, it's a lot easier to deal in forms. It's a lot easier to deal with
this is not what I want.
when the page name actually matches is the entity name.
Yeah, okay, so this is what I mostly use page forms for, is that I have the ability
Query forms, yeah.
to do query forms, yeah. And aside from this, I pretty much only have 2 other forms that I use actually to create pages. I've been meaning for like literally 4 years now to make a couple more forms, but it's just so low priority that I just haven't done it. So eventually.
Okay, well, sorry to monopolize the conversation and to lead you on a tangent here, but how do you, just one other question, how do you populate these pages if not through forms?
So I am in love with the extension care insert. So like, if you go here and then you go to edit it, so all of these, you can like click here and then, or I guess it's not a full template. So you can insert a roster change. And then if you want to have another player here, then you can insert another player line. So I used so many care inserts, and I wrote a framework for making them really easy to find in Lua. So I just have a bunch of Lua tables like this that are all of the care inserts that you can click.
Yeah, okay.
So people do have to know how to like fill stuff in between the pipes and the arguments and stuff, and it definitely is more convenient more confusing than I'd like it to be. But because my wiki is like, we mostly care about making things nice for viewers, and then making things nice for editors is a secondary concern, which is the opposite of the case for most enterprise wikis, I think. So to me, it's not the end of the world if users. So for example, I have Visual Editor completely disabled on my wiki. It messes with my stuff way too much, and it's not worth it. But yeah, so I would like to have more forms, but until I've finished until I had made this roster changes project to the point where it can handle all new data, I was in a case where every day that I didn't work on this project, we were getting further and further behind in terms of data debt. And so all I wanted to do was finish all of the projects that eliminated us accumulating more data debt. And at that point in time, I can work on whatever I want. But until that time, I'm just building table schemas so that we can use new input types.
Okay. Yeah. Perhaps you wouldn't be quite as hardline about this page name thing if circumstances were different.
Well, the thing is, people do use my API, and I have had the page name change in the past, where one day it was storing on the overview page, and then, or a case of like, there's maybe 3 tournaments where stuff was very weird, and so for one of them, the team rosters were stored on a subpage instead of being stored on the overview page. And so if I'm joining on page name, that doesn't work. And that's actually the reason that I have this convention is that I did run into problems and I did have to change it, and seeing that I had to change it and all of the work that went into changing it, because then I had to do a search on my wiki for any time that I had page name in any table, because who knows what I've aliased and whatever. So the absolute pain of changing this multiple times, plus it's extremely easy to just alias page name as another field. You literally just write overview page equals page name, and if that ever changes, if you ever have to do more work than that, then you were guaranteed to have page name break. So at absolute worst case scenario, you do slightly more work in every store.
That's true. That's a very good point. Yeah. All right.
And a lot of people use my API, and I was also saying this the other day that it terrifies me how much direct access people have to my database tables. There's no layer of abstraction in between. If a page changes, could redirects keep the join on page name from breaking? Oh man, redirects are so, okay. So cargo, the cargo idea of case sensitivity is very different from the MediaWiki idea of case sensitivity. And binary doesn't even work because lowercase letters exist. And so you could have one input has a lowercase first letter and the page has a capital first letter, but otherwise the cases are the same. So you want to be case insensitive, but then you could have two pages with different casing that both redirect to the same page, which happens constantly. And then case insensitivity leads you to duplicate rows everywhere. There's also some issue that has been, I've reported this like 5 times on the cargo talk page, but I can't even diagnose the issue. All I know is that special characters are kind of weird and Unicode does weird things and I don't know what happens. And so I create a separate table. So I have this player redirects table, and you can see this is where I aliased overview page last week because I was so embarrassed about how I was using page name everywhere. So I have this ridiculous workaround to make everything with case sensitivity work. So I have one row per non-case sensitive thing. And it solves the lowercase issue.
Oh, man.
So anyway, redirects could keep the join on page name from breaking, yes, but it would have to be done via so either A, you would have to ensure that you never have a case of 2 different cases redirecting the same page, which is not good most of the time because then a red link will happen if you ever need to show with a different casing or whatever. Or you could just always, like you could have a convention where redirects are always lowercase or some, I don't know, you could probably figure out something. But you would have to add another table into every join, and you could use the page data table for that. I don't, because the same stupid case sensitivity issues, and it's the worst. But yeah, so I guess the answer is like, it's so much more work to make redirects keep it working than it is to just not use page name, that you would just use page name. And also in a lot of cases where it might start to break, like you wouldn't want to make the overview page redirect to the subpage. So yeah, don't use page name. Also, another reason to not use page name is that the MediaWiki API thing is really annoying, where you have to alias fields as without underscores because MediaWiki doesn't allow underscores in API response keys, I guess. That's
Oh yeah, that's a
so annoying. Oh my god.
Right.
Yeah, it's not. I don't think it's your fault. I'm pretty sure it's MediaWiki API's fault, but you can get around that by not using page name.
Okay.
I guess I wouldn't say that specific reason is sufficient to justify.
I thought the previous reasons were a little stronger.
Yeah, just a little bit stronger.
all adds up.
Just consider it icing on the cake that you already had to do it, but now you get this happy benefit too.
Oh. Brian has a question.
Oh, recurring dates.
Brian, can you just talk?
I was not going to interrupt it. I was just going to see if maybe as a topic we could talk about, but
Oh yeah, no, feel free to interrupt.
but I was having an issue in Cargo trying to display reoccurring dates. And
Oh, is this the semicolon separated thing?
yeah.
Okay.
Using the recurring event parser function?
Yeah. It seems to store okay, but I can't seem to show it in a calendar.
Oh, I don't know anything about calendars.
Okay.
I'm not really prepared right now. I had an issue and I was trying to figure it out at one point, and Megan and I took a look at it and we thought that maybe it was something that wasn't working correctly, but I'll prepare myself.
Oh, I do kind of remember
Okay.
that. Wait, didn't I write on the Cargo Talk page? I don't know. I do that a lot.
So I'll go try to take a look, but yeah, maybe I'll prepare a bit and then we can talk about it tomorrow or something.
Yeah. Okay. I was gonna say Cindy. I don't know if she's here right now, but
I am. I'm just
okay.
quietly listening.
Oh, okay,
Letting you
yeah,
do
you're
your
a
thing.
big proponent of it's just assigning random IDs to pages.
Oh, that sounds so willy-nilly. I'm
Just no rules.
It's not quite that simple. So yes, in the past, and I have to say that I'm trying to think, for the recent wikis I've built, I have not used that as much.
Oh, okay.
Because they've been, so the wiki that I use mostly recently is the one that I put in the chat earlier, that it scrapes information from our Fabricator site and stores it. And so the pages are named after the Fabricator ticket ID, the task number, and that's relatively static. So, but previously, in many of the wikis that I built, first of all, I hate redirects. I don't know why.
Redirects are the best.
I know, we had this conversation, I think, in Daly City last year. Redirects, just the thought of having my nice, clean wiki with all of its pages and then putting this nest of webs of redirects that might redirect to other redirects.
I love them.
Oh my God, it just makes my brain hurt. So consequently, what I do is whenever in that kind of a wiki where I've got pages that are, products or people or projects or whatever, that may not have a name that will last forever, or that you may want to rename, or that you might type the name incorrectly. To avoid that, using page forms, I use the unique, I guess it's in the info tag, to generate a unique page name for each page. And then I use another field on the page to store the what the human readable name is. And so the URL will have some unreadable, non-pretty way of indicating the page, but everything will, and that's one of the reasons that I got so involved in display title and took over the semantic title extension, which eventually morphed into the display title extension, was so that you could have in the wiki to the user everything display in whatever the current display title happens to be, but that there would be another unique ID. Not the page, it never occurred to me. Now I'm thinking, wow, I wonder if there would be a way. No, I think there's a chicken or egg problem with using the actual page ID.
Okay, so I have like the past, okay, so like I said, a lot of people are using my wiki for as my wiki API, and the past like 2 or 3 weeks, people have become very vocal that they need a static primary key for player pages, and players can end up disambiguated, and when that happens, the page moves and it's not static, and the ID from cargo is not static. And so my thought has always been I should just use page ID. And the reason I don't want to use page ID is that sometimes people move pages by copy pasting.
Right.
Oh,
Yeah. That makes sense.
So I was thinking about
Right.
like doing can I like write a script that runs on cron nightly to write the page ID to the template if
Oh
it's
my
not
gosh.
there yet, so that I have the page ID populated, but then it wouldn't be in the form and people are supposed to edit by the form. But what if someone like sees this and is like, oh, I totally know about MediaWiki. I know that this means page ID, so I'm going to move this page by copy pasting it and then edit the page ID. And they're just like GG the primary key forever. So I really want to use primary key, or I really want to use page ID as my primary, or as like the static primary key for the external reason. And I think that actually would work because you can do it with subs, right? When you first save the page, if you subs the magic word of page ID, I think that would work on create.
Oh, right. Yeah.
You could do that for the page name?
For the ID. So instead of
Well, at
The
least
page
for the
ID.
at least for the page ID. Okay. Yeah,
right.
yeah.
So instead of saying, so just accept that the page name is going to be non-static, but then populate the field with the ID, and then to guard against people moving pages incorrectly, have something that that hard codes it into the text. And then maybe, and I was thinking, do I create a local backup of everything so that I can check this and check if my local backup matches or not? Or what if I store some hash in some data table and I can check if something, I don't know. So far my stance has been, just go away, make your own primary key. I'm not helping you with this.
So if you used a it would substitute on the first time you save the page, but somebody could go in later and edit it and change it to something
Yeah,
else,
they
right?
Right,
Well,
exactly.
yeah.
So if you edit the page with a form though, and you don't put this into the form,
Well, yeah.
and then you also hide the edit button with CSS so that they can
Security
only edit the form.
security through obscurity. Yeah, there you go.
Yeah, so I've been thinking like probably in 99.9% of cases that's going to be fine. But then people are basing all of their code on my API, and that's just 99.9% is scary when I have 7,000 player pages. I think it's 8,000 player pages now, and I've been considering making another 10,000 automatically so that I can deal with this issue of 10 years, and that's like having 2 mistakes, and that's not okay.
Yeah.
But yeah, so I think in your case of wanting to have the static thing, I think I would actually use page ID and just give up on title and never use the title for anything and make
Right.
their field.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
And just avoid it. Yeah. So in addition to not liking redirects, I could do it so that people could just create a page and name it whatever they wanted to. But then, they create a page called Apple, and then Apple never gets used, and it's really pear everywhere. That bothers me too. So,
And then you would have to have a redirect to fix it.
Right. I don't want redirects.
Yeah.
So, yeah. But yes, that's why I generally, for things like that, where there isn't a pre-existing static ID for something, I just have it generate a long string of random numbers.
And it's hard to guarantee that an ID for something is going to be static.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Basically, like as soon as you have 2 different types of entities, you can't guarantee it anymore because you might have overlap and need to disambiguate.
Oh yeah, well, one of the first wikis I worked on, it was a long time ago. This is the first time I hit across this problem, and actually it was the CIA. I had a
Oh, maybe you should stop recording.
no, that's okay. I had a wiki that was basically holding a library of stuff, and there were organizations in them. Was one type of page, and then there were books, and then there were authors. And so there was a particular book that was, the author was the CIA, but then also there was this other page that was the CIA organization. And so 2 pages named the same thing, but they were different entity types. They were different, and so I needed a way to refer to the 2 of them completely different. And they used different templates and different categories, but they couldn't both be named the same thing. So at any rate, and that was the first time I'm like, I just need to use unique IDs so that I don't wind up with these collisions. Because then you could add a disambiguation page, but then you'd need to decide what to name the pages, the disambiguated versions of the pages. And
Right.
it was a big naming thing that I just didn't even want to get into. And I'm like, I'm just going to call it, page 134 and page 765, and just have them have a name field of a semantic media wiki at that time. So semantic property that was the name, the display name of the page.
So what does a person click if they want to make a new page?
Oh, everything's done through, what is it, form link?
Yeah, or a form red link now.
Okay, yeah. So you do not have where you've got a text field to type something in and then click create page. It's all just through clicking a link. It takes you straight to a page form. You fill in the values and you hit save.
Yeah, the tricky part comes if you want to put in the name of somebody who is not in the system or that kind of thing.
Yeah. And the other, and if there's anything, the only other thing, and I managed to always work around it, but there were a few tricky cases where when you wanted to create a new page and on save, you wanted to do something based upon, or display something. Let's say in your form, you wanted to display what the name of the page was. Well, you don't know the page because you don't know the name, the actual name, the title, until you save the page. It doesn't get assigned, and so you can't use it on the page. And so I'd have some tricky stuff that would say, lots of if parser functions or Lua that would determine whether I was creating a page or editing an existing page. And if I was editing an existing page, I might show a little bit more stuff on the form than I would otherwise.
Yeah. Sorry, I corrected you before. You said form link, then I said form red link, but no, it actually would be form link.
Okay.
You only use form link because you don't know the name of the page yet.
Yeah. So that's how I would always create the pages.
Yeah, that would be the dream for me, to never have to move a page ever. But I don't think my users would like that so much.
See, that's why you don't need redirect.
Right.
Well, so the issue for us is that players rename constantly, and players share the same name constantly. So there's this is lovely. So fortunately, we have
Whoa.
We do the real life name of a player. So normally a player page is just like this, is named after their ID. But if there's a collision, then we do like this. And then sometimes
Wikipedia style.
We do Uzi here because he's way more famous than the other one, but then it has a link to the disambiguation page. And obviously all of this is done through cargo queries, so there's no extra maintenance for it.
Ah, nice.
That's so cool.
So yeah, so so right now the disambiguation page has the knowledge of how to, so this is done by Lua module. And I think it should just be one line. So it doesn't query to get all of the entities that belong here, because there could be teams also, and so I can't just query the players table. And I'm in the process of making this entities table that's going to be stored from every single info box on every single page, so that this can just say disinvig page, and then it queries every entity with entity name equaling moon, and then and then I want to store. I obviously haven't actually coded this yet, but the disambiguation sentence should be stored from here so that the player info box knows how to make the player disambiguation sentence. But right now, disambiguation pages only support players, teams, and other, and this page is the one that knows how to write the sentences, but that's like obviously the wrong place for the logic. So I need to move it over and make this entities table. And yeah, so it'll be a smoother system once I write all that code. But again, the problem was freaking red links, because we had these. So that's the reason I haven't done it yet, is that we have a bunch of disambiguation pages. I probably have a query somewhere. Yeah, disambigs. What am I looking for? I don't know. But we had a bunch of red links and a bunch of disambig pages. So every player that we want to show up on a disambiguation page, if I'm doing this entities table, has to exist, because I can't store the data anywhere except for the page about it, because otherwise it's a zero normal form violation. So you can't have red links. So someone's slowly going through and changing like 400, creating 400 or something player pages to get rid of all of the red links and disambigs.
I do have to say also that I did, there were a couple projects that I worked on where people were like, they wanted to have pretty URLs. They wanted to be able to see the thing in the URL, and I've had requests for things. Also, just since then, for display title, people would like to be able to use the display title in creating the link on a page, rather than having to know what its ugly actual page title is.
Yeah.
And so there is potential. There are pitfalls there. There are things that are not great for user experience that would be nice to improve.
The URL thing is also a huge SEO issue if it's a public-facing wiki and you care about SEO.
Yeah, exactly.
Oh, right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm kind of jealous of enterprise use cases where you don't have to care about SEO and you can just do whatever makes the most sense for the development of the wiki, but I have to care.
Oh yeah, I never had to worry about SEO at all. It was great.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I wrote a blog post 2 days ago about this incredibly elaborate thing that I wanted to do that would have solved my entire issue. And
I love the title. I'm sorry.
it would have solved my entire issue with the 10 years and having player pages not exist and stuff. But then it's like, oh, that would be bad for SEO. You can't do that. And I'm like, why? I need to do this thing. What am I supposed to do if I can't do this thing that I need to do?
But so now basically anyone who's ever played Fortnite can have a page.
Yeah, anyone who's any player who is placed high enough in a tournament that we track to get power ranking points has a page, and I have a script that runs daily and makes all of the pages.
Oh wow.
So yeah, my wikis would like not exist without cron tab. It's kind of scary.
Yeah. It is wonderful what you can do with cron jobs running across your wiki.
Oh my god, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Man, yeah, you don't need any human intervention there. It's just,
Yeah, this is my current cron tab for my
Whoa.
wikis.
Man.
Nice.
And then like what you're not seeing is that the once per minute and once per 15 both do like 5 different things. And the weekly one, I originally intended to run it weekly, but now it's running every 12 hours. And I started running it every 12 hours when I first implemented it. So I don't know why it's called weekly, but this one does like 50 different things. So this is a very understated summary of how many things are running on cron.
Okay.
So each one does a bunch of stuff, huh?
Yeah.
Nice.
Yeah, it's actually an issue that I'm having right now is that I want stuff running on cron, and then I also want people to be able to call it on demand from a Discord bot. And I also want to be able to run it myself without using the Discord interface. So I need this code to run from 3 places, which means that I need to put into a library so that I have like reasonable source control. And that's just like, it's so much effort. I have so many random repositories right now, and I need to like not have so many random repositories. So I like a bunch of development is just on hold until I figure out how I want to like save all of this Python code.
Nice.
You can't just put it on GitHub or something?
Well, it's like, I mean, it is. So,
Oh, okay.
oh,
Ah,
why is it so slow?
GitHub's down at the moment.
Is it
Oh.
really?
Yeah.
What?
No.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh. Okay, well then I'll show you locally, I guess.
Oh, Peter just wrote that Leaguepedia is cited a lot on the English language Wikipedia, which you'd think is against the rules, but
I thought that was again. Okay, I remember a couple of years ago, someone joined my server from Wikipedia and was like, "How do you get your data? Because I want to get it all for Wikipedia." And I was like, "Can't you just cite us?" And they were like, "No, you're a wiki." And I was like, I'm not helping you duplicate 100% of the work that I do because you're not allowed to cite a wiki because you're Wikipedia. That is not happening.
well,
I'm
yeah.
glad when they relaxed the rules about citing wikis, because in general, I think
Did they?
Some wikis should be cited. Well, if it's
Did they
being
relax the
allowed-
rules?
I'm not aware that the rules are officially relaxed. I just think when it happens, it's often sensitive.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I can't even fit it on one screen. So this is like all of the random scripts that I have.
Now we're talking.
And then that's not including the archive, this is all just random scripts. Yeah, I don't really know how I want to organize all of this. Right now it's just like 2 separate repositories, one for live and one for archive. But like if I want all of this stuff accessible through everything, then it has to be a library. But I don't want that to be a library. There's too much stuff.